cold calling is not dead, but the agents that rely on only cold calling are getting left behind. Because in 2026, the smartest agents are no longer trying to talk to everybody. They're targeting the right sellers at the right time. And the real shift happening right now in real estate is this: top agents are moving away from volume based prospecting and toward precision prospecting. Instead of chasing random leads, they're identifying people already likely to sell because of life transitions, equity positions, financial pressure, or changing goals. And here's the crazy part. Many of these sellers are sitting right in front of agents, but most agents never learn how to identify them. So in this video, I'm going to break down the 5 seller types smart agents are targeting in 2026 to generate listings without doing cold calling. Are you ready? So what's really happening in 2026? Well, from where I'm sitting, the game has changed. And so what's really happening? So cold calling isn't dead. And I'm not a big fan of cold calling. I do it, but it's not the favorite thing I like to do. And if you're like me, just the thought of like getting geared up, sitting down for, an hour or 2 or 4 every day, Monday through Friday, it's just not the height of what I like to do in my real estate investing business. So the real shift I find for me is when I target people who are very motivated and I get them to call me. Now, do I still have to cold call? Yes, I do, but I'm doing less and less of it as I'm learning how to be better marketer towards select people who are motivated. So looking at those motivated sellers is the key to doing less cold calling. So let's look at some old ways that we used to find leads. So number 1, the old prospecting model is just breaking down. As I just said, just the thought of cold calling, especially if you're brand new and you're just trying to build, you're working off your sphere of influence. So I have a very good friend. She's been in real estate for 40 some years. She still calls me, not as often as she used to because she doesn't need to. She has like a team of 15 people now. She wanted to know if I knew of anybody or if I was working with any properties that I might need to have listed, even though I'm a real estate investor, and she knows I don't do a ton of listings. So, but I might have some connections. So she would just contact me, and every now and then we go out and have a happy hour. The rising cost of leads, oh my goodness. And so, yes, there's more and more companies now that do pay at closing. But what if you could, actually not have to pay as much for your leads? Would that make a difference in how much you're taking home? So it's kind of a cost of doing business. And then lower answer rates. How many of you are so tired of spam calls, right? So when you're doing cold calling, it's really hard to get through to people, and people are screening. They're using, even I find it difficult sometimes to get someone to answer. Or if you're like me, you're not even answering numbers that you don't recognize. And then text messaging. Maybe I'm old school, but I don't really respond to people who are texting me, especially if I don't know who they are, and they send some random text about how I'm doing or whatever, just to get me engaged. So this is really bad from wholesalers. They like to text a lot. But now with all the new rules and everything, you have to be careful about how you're doing outreach through cold calling. You have to make sure you're, when you do get a list to cold call, that you're, scrubbing it against the do not call list. And then like consumer resistance, they like do not call, right? That's what I'm saying is you've got to scrub your list against the do not call. So if that was your only form of communication, how are you getting listings? How are you finding sellers? And then you're just competing with Zillow leads, realtor leads, all the leads. I see it. You can look at any real estate Facebook group and people will say, where are you getting your leads at? And everybody will say, this is where I'm getting my leads at. And I'm having really great success. And so then what happens? Everybody wants to try that, that lead list. So, you have a lot of competition. So how are you going to stand out? How are you going to get people to even notice you if you're doing cold calling, texting, you're mailing to every list that everybody else is? And then how about AI? Woo, how is AI disrupting your marketing on cold calling? There's larger larger brokerages than you and I that can hire companies that they do the robocalling, they sound like a real person. And it's so annoying where people just are not, they're not wanting to respond to that. I like to work with a couple different groups of people. And so if you're like me and you're like the other women that we have, worked with, you're probably thinking, well, I could do this too. So number one is my inherited property owners. And I've done a couple different videos about this, but the majority of these people are highly motivated to sell the property. So this could be under the probate, the pre-probate. There's a lot of emotional pressure to do something with the house. There's usually some financial pressure. If someone's inherited a property and, they don't want to pay the property taxes, they don't want to do the upkeep on a vacant property, or maybe they don't want to deal with the rental. So, how can you reach them? Well, you can do direct mail. That's what I do. It's my number one go-to marketing strategy, direct mail. You could work with probate attorneys. You can build that relationship. You can provide educational content. You can do workshops. You can do lunch and learn. So there's a lot of ways to get your name out there in terms of who to work with and how to get these type of leads. Now, the landlords who are wanting to just get out of the rat race, right? They are just so tired. I think, there was a lot of tired landlords after the COVID era. And if some people are just not cut out to be landlords. I mean, there's a certain skill, and you have to be very organized if you're going to be managing your own properties, or, get in touch with property managers because they might know of landlords that need to sell their properties. So, they're ready to sell because the cost, property taxes and insurance are probably two of the biggest challenges right now for rental properties. So if they have held a rental property and now the value, the equity has gone up, but so is the property taxes, so is the insurance. And then is the rental growth slowing? In certain areas it is, certain areas it's not. So some place where, like I've used the example of a property I first bought 20 years ago, that area is still a hot commodity for leasing. But some areas where maybe the shift has been away, I know there are parts of Makin, Texas, where they thought they were going to put in a dart rail or something like that, and that didn't happen. And I know several investors who bought speculatively in that area, and now they're not seeing that much growth, and they're also not seeing their rents kind of bounce back. And then there's accidental landlords. So there's people like the inherited properties where, maybe mom or dad's house, they decided to turn it into rental. They had no idea what they were doing or what they were getting into. They're completely disorganized and they decide to manage it themselves. And then they're going to rent to a family member or a friend or whatever, and it turns into a complete disaster. I've mentioned before that I go to eviction court every now and then because there's tired landlords there. So some of my best deals I've gotten are from tired landlords. So you can do absentee owner lists. You can do high equity targeting from the MLS, then you could get this stuff for free. So these types of lists are very free. You could do Facebook ads. I haven't really found much. I don't think a lot of people have credibility, but you could do it out there. And then you could also do educational videos to, tired landlords. So there's also the downsizers, right? So this is usually the senior population, family shifts, generational homes are becoming quite popular now. So there's usually significant equity. You do need to check that they haven't, taken out all the equity or whatnot. I have found that to be happening. Empty nesters, retirement transitions, just people who are wanting to move. People who are they're going through a life transition and they need to sell the property. So there's all kinds of opportunities if you know where to look. And then distressed sellers. So I like working with distressed sellers. And as I've mentioned before, it's because I like to help them solve whatever problem that they're going through. And there's usually a lot of emotion around working with distressed sellers whether the distress is coming from financial, divorce, death. There's really a lot of emotion. Sometimes divorced people, they don't want to sell the house. One party, there could be a lot of anger. When somebody passes away, there could be a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, a lot of I don't know what to do, lack of knowledge. So there could be multiple things that are preventing them from moving forward from selling the property. And, so you can look at all these different areas, whether it's a financial strain, whether it's a life disruption. Divorce is a life disruption. And in my previous video about, having only one income stream. So, and sometimes you're not equipped to handle that, right? And so how to reach that, so you don't cold call. Most of the time, you don't cold call these folks because it's just not the right time. It's just not the right time. And let me just give you a little tip here. So back in the day when I first started working with very distressed sellers, I would get the list, I would download, I had a Mojo dialer, I would just dial, 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 dial. And I was called some of the most horrible names I've ever been called. I mean, I had to get a thick skin. But then I realized I wasn't being very effective cold calling. And it was a lot of expense with all, Mojo and, getting the list and downloading it and a lot of time scrubbing it and, remove my name and that kind of thing. So there was just a lot of consternation for me in how I was going to run my business. So, off market, likely to sell owners. This is who I really like to work with, and this category is exploding. There's less competition, there's usually high equity, and there's privacy first. That's what you have to kind of think about. So, many prefer a private sale about. Now, so you could target these 5 different seller targeting framework. What I would suggest if you're just now getting into off-market opportunities and working with distressed sellers is to kind of pick one. Pick one, right? Because you can't be all things. If you're like the other people that we've been working with, you just want to work with one group of people, right? So we call them distressed sellers, but I work the best with people who have inherited a property. Those are who I like to work with. It doesn't mean that I can't work with the other groups, but when I'm doing my marketing and I'm targeting, that's who I'm going after. I am looking for people that inherit a property due to death. That is what my niche market has become. And most of the time they're off market, and most of the time because of the skill set required to deal with these types of sellers, I have less competition because a lot of people don't know to come in there with the emotions first, the wallet second. So smart agents are becoming problem solvers, not just a listing machine, right? So I know people will spend hours and hours creating the perfect listing presentation, which is good, but does it always have a place right during the first call? No, it does not. So you have to gauge when is it appropriate to present your marketing package, right? You can spend time outbounding in terms of direct mail as opposed to cold calling, which I prefer 100% over, because when someone calls you because of your marketing, they're 9 times and you're able to, talk to them, listen to them. When somebody calls me about my marketing material, I'm not saying, well, how much do you want for your house? Or, when can I come out? We are having a conversation. So that's what I'm doing first. I'm building rapport with them. You get better listings in terms of, you're looking for strategies to attract high quality sellers, meaning that you're spending less time, trying to get all these other people. And there's going to be more trust. If you can build up this niche, you're going to build up trust. And you know what happens when you build it up? You get referrals. So when you work and you learn how to work this particular type of seller, you will then in the long run get other listings because they're going to remember how you treated them. So what do most agents miss? Well, timing is everything. So I had a lady, I do a webinar every month for this company about how to work with these particular types of leads. And so she was on there and she said, well, I have these leads from years ago. I'm thinking about about contacting them again. And I said, well, okay, that's good. But maybe before she does that, what she should do is kind of, I don't know, refresh the list. Different time periods take different action. So when I contact someone, shortly after someone's passed away, I have a very specific way of doing that. And then I'm also consistent in my follow up. So if someone contacts me and they're like not ready to sell, then I've got a CRM, which you should have some type of system so that you can do the follow up, because that's really like one of my old coaches used to say, the follow up, the gold is in the follow up. And then trust is the makes the difference. Okay. If they can trust you with to help them solve their problem, that's what they're looking for. And that's what you have to convey. So why does this approach work? Well, I've been doing it since 2018. I feel like that I've been able to identify these motivated sellers. I've built the trust before I do the listing, or sometimes I purchase the property, and I've been able to generate leads without doing much of any cold calling. So the old school I used to do was cold calling. Oh my gosh, yeah, it looked like a mess. But now I do precision prospecting for distressed sellers in particular areas that I want to either invest or enlist in. So I'm in more control of who I am working with. So the opportunity is already here, and before the listing appears. So the opportunity. So if this video resonates with you in terms of you really want to find different ways, I have a friend, she loves cold calling, bless her heart, and she teaches people how to do it. And I say, yay. For some people it's good. For me, it's not what I do best. It's not that I can't do it. It's not that you can't do it. It's just sometimes it's not what we like to do, right? And so I have just found a better way for me and my business. And if you're like all the other women that we work with, you're probably saying, I want to know how to do that. So if that's the case, I'm going to invite you to do a couple things. One, book a strategy call with me you can find my calendar link in the link below or in the description below. And let's just have a strategy call about, does this work for you? And then what we would do on that strategy call is about 15-20 minutes. And we're just going to see if your goals align with what we can help you with, right? And then we'll help you. By the end of that call, we'll have a bit of a plan that you can implement right away, or you can say, okay, I'm going to think about this. There's no pressure. It's not a sales call, that kind of thing. It's really just informational and finding out, okay, well, how could I do this? What avenue should I take? So whether you've been in the business for a long time and you've done things a certain way, or, maybe this is the first time you're hearing about this type of strategy, reach out. I'd love to just have a conversation with you. Again, check out my other video about how I work with off-market properties. Again, my name is Nancy, and I am a real estate broker and investor. So if you have a deal that you need to sell, you can always call me. But do reach out, leave me a comment, email me. Again, all my contact information is below again, all my contact information is in the description below. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.